Hello, church family. This is Owen Fay for another episode of the FBC Extra Podcast. And if you've seen someone at our welcome table or in front of the congregation welcoming our new members, it was definitely today's guest, our Associate Pastor Steve Putney. But today, Matt's going to be asking a few questions of his own. Ask away.
So most of you know Pastor Steve Putney as your Associate Pastor. For some of you, he might be your Sunday school teacher. But before he was any of that, he was my professor at Liberty University, Biblical Worldview 1 and Biblical Worldview 2, correct?
That's correct.
So I was in the fall of 2012. I was a brand new, freshly minted Liberty student. And I walked into my first class with you. And that was kind of your thing, right? Was you were teaching the first year students Biblical Worldview. And I still have my workbook from that class. I don't know if you know that.
I didn't know that. I do have mine. It's down in a cabinet somewhere here.
Yeah,
so
that was one of the more memorable classes. I still think about that from time to time. And then I had you in the spring for Biblical Worldview 2 as well. I still have that workbook as well. So Dr. Steve Putney was my professor, and here we are almost a decade later, and now we're sitting in the same church trying to accomplish the same mission. Small world, God's timing, everything kind of laps around. I mean, how do you view that?
yeah, it really is. It's been interesting how the Lord has worked through the years and moved from one ministry to another at times. It wasn't like some grand plan or scheme that I had or a step to move from here to there or anything like that. It's just kind of how he would sovereignly move through time. I would have never guessed that I would be here now, even though I was interested in Liberty for years because I grew up in the area. Never really would have thought that I would be there. And so it's fun looking back at this point in life and just seeing some of the ways that the Lord was moving.
So I just found this out today. I was an LCA Bulldog in my high school days before Liberty University. So were you. But you went back in the day, so you're from the area originally?
I was back in the day. I was born and grew up in Goochland County, which is west of Richmond.
Gotcha.
But then when I was 11 years old, we moved to this area. My dad, who had been a consultant forester and part-time farmer, went to full-time farming, and we had a farm just a couple miles from here as the crow flies. And so, love those years. And when I got to high school, the school I was going to, middle school, elementary and middle school, only went through 8th grade. But right at that time, Dr. Falwell opened LCA up for the whole high school, which was perfect timing. The year before, it wouldn't have worked. The year after would have been too late for me at that point, but was able to go through my 4 high school years at LCA back in the early 70s. So
wow,
they were great days. And that was, I think, in my sophomore year, actually, when Liberty University began, though it was Liberty Baptist College.
That's right.
That it was called back then.
So you remember the Lynchburg area back in the 70s.
Yeah.
I'm assuming it's different than 2022?
Yeah. I had been gone from the area for 31 years until 2005 when I came to teach at Liberty. And when I came at that time, I remember the first time driving down 221 here, which had been always just a 2-lane road. And I remember between here and almost to Lynchburg College, there were 2 or 3 buildings that I recognized. Everything else was different. The whole area had changed. And of course, this area out in the forest area had changed dramatically. Paravel Road, we live off of Paravel Road now in a development.
That's right. I'm out in Farmington where you're at. I see you walking all the time.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, I'm out there. Try to do 4 or 5 days a week. Yeah. Paravel Road, though, it was just a very few farms down that road. In fact, I tell people now, it's busy traffic on the road. Back then, you probably could have gone and laid down in the middle of the day, taken a 30-minute nap, and never had a vehicle even come by. The forest area has grown dramatically, and I think a lot because this area in Bedford County is just one of the prettiest areas anywhere in the world, probably. So
now, you may have gotten to Lynchburg before me, but I got to Forest Baptist Church before you.
You did.
You came along in, I think, 2014-ish, somewhere around there.
I think you're about right.
And I remember you would fill the pulpit a little bit, and you started getting involved, and I remember thinking, wow, my professor is now at the church. That's awesome. And then I took off for Richmond, close to Goochland County where you're from, so we're circling around the other way. And then I come back, and you're associate pastor. What happened? How did that occur?
Yeah, that was interesting. In the spring of 16, after 11 years, my job at Liberty was going away. They were just changing what they were teaching, and the subject I was teaching was going to be kind of altered. And so I'm thinking, okay, what's next? And so I continued to work at Liberty in another job for the next 6 months or so, even after that. But partway through that time, our associate pastor here was planning on moving into a pastorate of his own in New Jersey. Soon before that time, had become an elder here at the church. So we began to look for who was going to be next. So there were a couple of funny instances that really came along the way.
So you nominated yourself? Is that what you're going to say?
No, not at all. Actually, really the opposite, because one of the other elders even asked one time, he said, Steve, would you be interested? And I started laughing, and I said, no. And I mean, I can tell you more about history before then, because I'd been a pastor many years, local. If you cut me, I'll lead local church, and had no intent of moving away from that idea, but I never thought I'd be in, quote, professional ministry again. In fact, it continued to stay like that until on in the fall a ways, and was got on the phone with Pastor Tyler one day, and we were talking about one subject, and I said, hey, I've also got an idea of a guy, because I've been trying to think and pray about who might be good to fit the associate pastor role here. And there's a guy that I knew from Liberty, and I said, I think this guy would be really good. And so I'm getting ready to tell him, and Pastor Tyler said, so does that mean you're not interested? And I thought, oh, no. Now I have to think and pray about it. Again, the Lord really began to change my mind and heart at that point, and think that's really it. And through a set of circumstances and just the way that he works, which is always different in my life than I figure the way it'll happen.
It's not just you.
So that's for sure. And so it just seamlessly worked, where in the January of 2017 began here full time.
Obviously, it's a relatively new role for the church. So what does associate pastor entail? I mean, what does your day-to-day look like? What does being associate pastor look like at Forest?
Yeah, it's I guess somewhat like other pastorates. I'd been a pastor for a lot of years before Liberty, but then at that time I was the solo pastor on staff. So it is different here, being on a multi-staff like this, where there are some different responsibilities, but even those day-to-day things can change as the needs come through the week, or as different people needs arise, different ministry needs arise. But my basic ones have to do with discipleship, and discipleship especially dealing with adult Sunday school, and then helping to oversee both the student ministry and the children's ministry guys. I mean, those guys are so competent they almost don't need overseeing, but it's a little bit oversight anyway. And then recently, even this past fall, we started small groups in the church, which
yes, we did.
Some have wanted to see happen for some time, and which I've done previously in previous ministries. So it was just a perfect fit, and has started very well, because especially we saw that we need in discipleship, part of what's needed is building relationships, or sometimes we call it fellowship. And so that is our primary focus at this point. There are a couple other minor focuses, but especially emphasizing fellowship in our small group ministries. One of the other responsibilities, and one of the ones that's been one of the ones that we still need the most work on, but we're starting to chip away at a little bit, is local outreach. It's just one of the tougher areas for us here, and sometimes for churches that have been around for a long time. It just takes pushing out in some different ways, and maybe unusual ways. But we're starting to see a little bit of that now, and hopefully a lot more even in the coming year.
I don't know if you have a Fitbit or if you count your steps, but you do an awful lot of walking. Because I feel like on Wednesday night, I'm down doing Gopher Buddies, I see you. And then I go upstairs, and the choir, I see you. And then on Sunday mornings, you're downstairs, you're upstairs, you're all the way around. I mean, you do a lot of welcoming. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, kind of interesting. I've always moved around a lot, I guess. Part of that was growing up on a farm. I see people walk, and it seems like they're hardly moving. That would not have worked with my dad.
No.
Growing up, it's like, get moving. It's like, so I still walk fast. So yeah, I mean, you see me around the neighborhood. I'll walk 4 or 5 days a week. I try to walk 15 to 20 miles a week, something like that anyway. We've got a great neighborhood, as you know, to
we
be able
do,
to walk
and you
in.
get to watch me try to walk my dog. I fail, but I try.
With labs, they usually walk you.
I've never walked him. He always walks me.
I understand. We used to have a lab. But here at church, I try to get around because I want to just, see what's going on, be sure that everything's in order. If anybody needs any help with anything, greeting people. I mean, church is about people. It's not about me making sure that I do my thing. It's about people. And so needs are continually changing. And I guess I'm sure I'm not the best at it, but it's one of the things that's always been important with me. It was when I was teaching at Liberty. It's the same thing when I was pastoring before, of watching people and watching their faces, seeing their eyes of what's going on. And you can tell a lot. I can tell a lot from that. It's not absolute, but I look for those things. It's funny, I guess I'm such a guy in so many ways. People will say, did you notice what so-and-so was wearing? And it's like, no, does it matter? It's like, you may remember back in class, we were supposed to be sure all the guys kept all the dress code back then that was there.
Yeah, I remember that.
Sometimes the boss would ask, and I'm thinking, I don't know. I don't see what they wear. I'm just trying to look at them.
Yeah.
Kind of, and, notice when people are hurting or when people are upset or whatever like that, and just see those things.
And we were in DeMoss 1113. That's a big classroom. That's a lot of clothes to go through.
That was, it was like 400 or so in a class.
Yeah,
so
that was big.
So the same thing here. I get around. Joel Rainey, one of our deacons here, is taking part of that ministry of the welcome and greeting. So just some of the organization of it and all, and recruitment he's doing, and it's not to relieve me of a job, but anything I'm doing, hopefully others are learning from, not so I can get rid of it, but just so that more people are really involved in ministry, which is what I love doing.
Well, also with, I guess in some ways with welcoming, you're also in charge of the new members class, correct? Yeah, that's another one of the really fun things we get to do 4, 5, 6 times a year. We'll have new members classes on a Sunday afternoon. We do it all in one day, Sunday afternoon on certain times, and 4 different elders will teach 4 different sections, and then we'll have interviews with those who want to keep proceeding in membership, and then just the real joy of it is being able to introduce them to the congregation for the congregation's approval on a Sunday morning along the way. So it really is, there's a lot involved with it, but it's really, really well worth it. So once they become members, what is the expectation for the church? I mean, obviously we put an emphasis on membership. For those of us who have been members for a while, who see, the changes in format and, once a time, and we send them up there. What does the church then expect once you present them to the church? We vote on them, we say aye, and then they walk away. What should we be expecting from the members? What are you expecting from the members? Yeah, well, I'm hoping, first of all, from the church that they have already been welcomed well into the church, really, accepted as full members, and people have taken time with them. But for them as well, we're really looking for them not just to have their name on the roll. In fact, if that's all somebody wants, we hope we've recognized that in the process and try to counsel further, advise further, that we want active members here. And so we try to help each one find their place of ministry and involvement within the church. I really fully believe that any of us can serve in a variety of different ways at a given time. For instance, we'll have, maybe the pastor will call sometimes for people to move the chairs in the sanctuary area, and a bunch of guys will just pitch in and do that. And great, that's great to see. But what I want to see even more is people to take the gifts, the abilities, the experiences, the passions that they have, and to be able to use them, and that be their area of main ministry. That's where they're going to be the most effective. That's where they'll be the most fulfilled in what they're doing. And for those who really don't know what that is, we just try to help them try different areas of ministry. And usually either they'll know pretty quickly, or we'll be able to observe and say, you're really good at this. And you just really need to keep emphasizing this, whether it's a formal ministry position or whether it's just an informal. And it really doesn't matter whether it's a title or whether it's not. So I asked Pastor Tyler this a couple weeks ago when we sat down. He hit 15 years of being the pastor, and I asked him what his assessment was of that time. You mentioned earlier you're hitting that 5-year mark, which I think is another pretty big milestone, especially in associate pastor role. So I want your assessment of the last 5 years in the role, what you've seen at Forest, what you've seen in your position. Just talk a little bit about that. Wow, that's a good one. Probably should do more looking back. I guess most of the time I'm so much looking ahead to what's next, and I've just been sort of geared that way through life, especially early pastorates. There was so much going on. For instance, I'm hoping I can bring more wisdom and experience into ministry now than I had then. It was just running from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next, such that I appreciate this at this point of life. I enjoy being the pastor, the senior pastor, whatever in a church. I don't have any desire
to do that again. I don't really think at this stage of life that I have, as far as I know, I'm in good health and all, but I don't think I have the same energy that I used to have. I don't know that I was ever driven, like some people, to just be like a workaholic. I don't think I've ever been that, but I've had to work a lot of times like a workaholic just because it had to get done. So the church does a good job of taking care of us here. I'm very thankful for the church and how they really look out for us in a lot of ways, with encouragement, but, also in just taking care of us financially. I think the church does a great job of that, and I'm just very grateful, to the church for that. The opportunities for ministry, I have a lot of freedom in that. Pastor Tyler is my boss in that sense, that there is a lot of freedom, and that he was wanting and willing to have a guy who's older, come in. A lot of pastors wouldn't necessarily do that. I'm really grateful for that. What my job is and what I do, what I told the church from the very beginning and told Tyler, and I've told him a couple times since then, my number one job is to take care of him and protect him. And I can see it even more important having been a pastor like that man, it can be tough, being at the top like that, in a sense, if you call it the top, whatever that might be. I hope I've got several more maybe. I know when I first came, I said, I'd love to be able to make it to 75, which is another 9 years or so, I guess. But I don't have any intention or plans at this point of quitting or retiring, unless I get retired. But that would not be my plan. That would be somebody else's plan, right?
Right. So I do want to hit again on, you mentioned earlier a little bit about small groups, but I have infinitely enjoyed mine. The Helms are running mine and the Boatners are hosting mine. I know you are running one that's hosted by
the Pinkhams.
Yeah. And I have loved mine. I know so many people, including myself, were looking for that. That was something you got done last year. Obviously, you've got a little bit of a sample size here on how they've gone. I believe mine's gone really well. I'm just going to let you know, we're trying to keep ours together as long as we can. But we don't really know how the other ones are going. And for people that are in one, or maybe not in one, and are kind of looking and going, let's see how this goes and where are we going to go. So tell us where you'd like to see it go as we move forward here.
Yeah, first of all, I think things have gone very well. One thing that's helped, rather than just saying we're having small groups and let's just kind of see what happens, they are very intentionally purposed, made as clear as can be to the leaders from the very beginning what we're trying to do with it. And so I think it's helped the leaders in the sense that it's not like, oh man, I'm going to have to spend several more hours this week getting prepared to lead. Our leaders are not teaching. They're not intended to be teaching times like that. We've got a lot of good teaching. If somebody wants it, come to services, come to Sunday schools. And if you learn what actually is being taught in those times so that you put it into action in life, then you've got a lot to go on already. With that in mind, then, we've made it very clear with the purposes that fellowship is number one, relationship building, and that has been happening in all 7 of the groups very powerfully from all of the feedback I've received. And different groups will have a little bit different personalities, and that's fine. That's been made clear from the beginning. We give leaders some questions they can ask for fellowship. We give them questions about the sermon in the way of application. They can use any of them, part of them, all of them, none of them, as long as they are sticking with the purposes. And of course, then the second purpose is to apply the sermon, but it is very secondary to the fellowship part, because when that relationship building is going, the second purpose is going to be accomplished somewhat anyway. So we're looking at this point, adding another, if you will, sub-purpose for some outreach. Some of the groups may have someone around, someone in the group may have, we've got this couple down the street. We know they don't know Jesus, and we really like to see them come to Christ. They like getting together with groups of people. We'd like to invite them. As long as the group is in agreement, the leader's in agreement with that, the host is in agreement, then they're going to have the freedom to be able to do that. So it's a smaller scale sort of thing. It's not like, okay, everybody bring your friends next week, because the group's too big then and the houses can't hold them. All of this is a little bit wet cement at this point. Go through the beginning of May and then break through the summer, start again beginning of September, and just continue, Lord willing, to have these fall, spring sessions.
For Sunday school, I'm not currently in one because I'm helping with the Sunday school for the 2nd and 3rd graders, but Sunday morning, Sunday schools, where are those at, and where are the ideas moving forward for that as well?
Yeah, adult Sunday school, we have 9 different classes that meet at this point, different teachers for each of these classes. We're really unique and very blessed in our church here and what we have. We have so many people who are trained, experienced Bible teachers. I guess we're very unusual in the sense we only have one class that uses pre-written literature, that comes from a distributor like that. All of the rest of our classes, our teachers develop their own curriculum for the class. I do not develop it for any of them. We do not have a standard church one. People say, well, how do you control what's being taught? We know our teachers and we know who they are and what they believe, and that they are sticking and staying in line with, with the Baptist faith and message and the beliefs of our church here. And so they are free to choose their topic and how long that book of the Bible or that subject that they're teaching will last. So for instance, the college class, most of theirs, Mark Hernandez, who teaches that class, most of the different series will not last more than 3 or 4 weeks because there's such a turnover of college students in and out.
Gotcha.
Doesn't want any long-term things there, which works great. Others will go for several months on a subject. I mean, there's some of the other classes that are going on for been at least 2 or 3 years in the Gospel of Luke now, and that's fine. I'm okay with that. Different teachers, different styles, different ways classes operate, different ages. The majority of our classes have a wide range of ages within the class. It's very different than Sunday school used to be.
Yeah.
Sunday school and churches used to always be graded by age. You went to a class that was your age. We don't have any classes that are divided by sex. We don't have any that are intentionally only this certain age. Then we have a senior adults class, but even in that class, I know there are a couple of college students who are also in that, and there may be a couple others that are a little bit younger than senior age that are in there. Just love the diversity. And what I'm finding is that our younger adults love being in class with older adults and just learning from the wisdom and experiences that are there. And the older adults just love the life and energy of the younger adults that are in there. I know in my class we have 20s to 80s literally in the class.
That's awesome.
And those of the different ages like that just absolutely love having people who are not just like them in class. So I think it works great. And for discipleship, I think it works. It's really about the only place in life other than elementary and high school where you do that. Yeah. The rest of life is not divided like that. It just works great, though. We're just really happy with it.
So what do you think discipleship should look like for us right now?
Do you know what question you're asking?
I do. I've been chomping at the bit to ask.
I'm not sure that I know totally what question. But I mean, there's so much of it. But the simplicity of it is discipleship is just learning to be a better follower of Jesus Christ. And so it involves so much over a lifetime. Again, I kind of remember when I was younger, you'd have these discipleship classes where in 6 weeks or maybe 12 weeks or whatever, you went through this discipleship class. And it's like, okay, now you've been discipled. It's like, no, not really. Even Jesus didn't complete the process in 3 years, time with his disciples. So it is a lifelong process, and it's not just through learning more stuff. We have to learn what truth is, but then it has to work out into the way we think and our attitudes, the way we live our lives, the way we speak, all of those things. And that involves more than just me sitting down with a book and then thinking through it and learning. It involves the whole church family together. And so we're all discipling one another. We're all being discipled by one another at the same time. It's the way it should work. And I think more and more it is the way it's working, I think, more and more. Now, I can't document that, and I don't think I ever will be able to. I remember in academia, one of the things you always wanted to be able to, document how progress was being made and all these things. Yeah. And I remember even then thinking the things that I really care about most, you can't document, though. It's like, okay, we can give all these statistics and all this stuff, and it's all fine, but it doesn't really touch the most important things. And the same thing with church like that. I mean, we can look at it, but a lot of it is just kind of getting this general ballpark sort of idea as you just see people growing. And I think you see a lot of it through attitudes. You see a lot of it through relationships. I mean, you can have a really smart church, but if people aren't in unity with one another, can you call it a well-discipled church? And I would say absolutely no. All you're getting is a church that's probably arrogant.
So the big question, local outreach has obviously been something we're hoping continues to improve as we go forward. As Associate Pastor, what does that look like? Like, where's your head at when it comes to local outreach? And I'll just let you run with that.
Outreach and evangelism is a responsibility of all of us. There's some who that's their gift, and I'm hoping we'll have more and more people who are a part of the church where it is their gift, the gift of evangelism, if you will. Is it mine? It's not mine. Am I responsible? Well, sure. I'm just like everybody else. I'm responsible with that. And I guess one of the difficult things here, again, with the age of the church, you kind of get used to different things. And we've become, I think, really good at outreach internationally and outreach around the country, and even somewhat like downtown in Lynchburg with the DVPC and all that we're involved with there, and helping out with other ministries around. Forest has been different in a sense. Back in the day, you could go around and knock door to door, and it's still nothing morally wrong about doing that. But we live in a different time where most people don't really want strangers just coming knocking on their door. And I gotta be honest, I really don't want to be sitting down at night and have somebody I don't know just come knocking on my door. I don't know if it's just change in me or something from having lived in the North for almost 10 years, where if you did that, it was a good way of getting arrested probably.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, I think I've got a pretty good grip on the majority of people around in this area. Also in this area, it's a middle class and upper middle class, mostly in Forest area. Do you reach out to them by having a food pantry or a clothes closet or something? Probably not many that would need that kind of thing here. So some of those typical ways, we've had to look at and say, do we want to pour our energy into them? No. I think one of the somewhat effective things we've done for trying to just have a good reputation in the community, which is very helpful. A church with a bad reputation is going to have a hard time reaching out at any point. Through our Easter extravaganza and fall festival, some of these events for children bring in their parents as well. And so they at least get a look at the church and the people of the church. So those are good, and we're hoping to see some other ministries like that. What are all of those? And I don't have the answers. I wish I did. It's the area of ministry that's the toughest in a lot of ways. One, just because of where my gifts and abilities are, but also just because of where the church is. I think there's a growing desire. And great thing is, a couple of our new deacons, they are heading up more and looking at and moving towards more of a local outreach as well. And so that's a new thing for us as a church, is to have a couple deacons that are really tasked with that and desire that sort of leadership of our ministry.
So I'm interested in this. One of the other things that you do is you do the scripture reading from time to time. It feels to me like you're doing the different voices for the different characters in the story. Is that correct?
To some degree, yeah. Because if it's a story, when people are talking, like you and I are talking right now, we don't have the same voice.
Right.
So why would we sound exactly the same?
Yeah, because it felt like the kings in Daniel last year had different voices than Daniel did, and then the narration. I felt like I was listening to a bedtime story from Uncle Steve is what it felt like.
Good. I think it's important, and really need to do is even more so, but try to read through out loud as much as I can in advance. Even, can I read that without having seen it in advance? Of course I can. But can I read it better because I know what's coming if I've practiced it in advance? And of course it's going to be better. So I think that's important. I don't like speaking, reading, anything, just the same tone, the same voice throughout the whole thing. It's just, to me, it just sucks the life out of it. It's alive. And if I do that, I feel like I'm killing what's alive. It's like Tyler says, it's only an errant part of the service.
Yeah.
So let's try to at least not make it boring.
And we've enjoyed listening to the different voices and it pop a little bit, especially with the passages that were a little bit longer. We had some big sections in Daniel last year where, it was like, wow, I can't believe they're able to say all that without taking a drink of water or something like that. And now I want to get you out on a fun question. Every single person I interview is going to get the same question, so I'm going to pose it to you as well. So if you were able to view one biblical event live with your own eyes, without having to suffer the ramifications of said event, where you have immunity from the consequences, but you got to view it live in person, which biblical event would you have wanted to have seen live in person?
Wow, down to one. Yeah, I always thought time travel would just be awesome.
Yeah.
If it was possible.
Yeah, me too.
I would do that. But I've never thought about it necessarily with biblical events, but the thing that popped just the quickest is the resurrection. Oh my lands, it's just like, I mean, that's it. I mean, there are others that might have seemed more fantastic, like the opening of the Red Sea or something like that. Whoa, or even, be there at part of some of the ones in Daniel that we saw.
Yeah.
To be there at Bethlehem, to go with the shepherds, all of that. But it's really got to be the resurrection, though.
I mean, that is the peak event.
It is.
All of them.
It is. So, if I only get one.
Yeah, you only get one.
That's got to be it.
Well, what specifically in the resurrection? Are you there the day when it's empty and everybody's rushing in? Or are you seeing Jesus
I'm seeing him.
absolutely resurrect?
Oh, absolutely seeing him. Whether it's right there on that day or right after or whatever. I mean, that's like, okay, it's all true. He's alive. The whole story's true. There is hope.
Well, Pastor Steve, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with us. We'll be hopefully enjoying small group Sunday schools, and we'll be welcoming the people that are coming in, and we appreciate what you do. So we'll be praying for you as the year goes on, as we come alongside and hopefully as a congregation continue to fight the good fight and disciple and do those things. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Matt.
If you want to learn more about small groups, memberships, or any other topics we've covered today with Pastor Steve, you can check out our weekly bulletin, which you can find online at forestbaptistchurch.org, along with a lot of other information about Forest. If you want to learn more about small groups, membership, or any other topics we've covered today with Pastor Steve, you can check out our weekly bulletin, which you can find online at forestbaptistchurch.org, along with a lot of other information about Forest. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel for the latest FBC content. We'll see you next time.